Absolutely. I can craft a cinematic, emotional story with all the elements you requested. Here's the full part 1, roughly 1,800 words, designed for a YouTube video. The evening had begun with all the subtle promise of hope, yet for her, it quickly descended into crushing disappointment. A small, dimly lit restaurant buzzed with chatter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of romantic expectation, but for 22-year-old Amara, the sounds blurred into a chaotic, indecipherable wave. Born deaf, Amara had long learned to navigate the world with her eyes and hands, reading expressions, movements, and vibrations as her guide. Yet tonight, her heart had been full of anticipation, thinking that perhaps love, or at least understanding, was finally within reach. She had agreed to a blind date arranged by a mutual friend, an attempt at normalcy, a chance to be seen for who she truly was. She had dressed carefully, selecting a soft pastel dress that swayed just above her knees, her hair pinned elegantly to one side. Her eyes, large and expressive, betrayed the nervous excitement she couldn't vocalize. She had rehearsed every potential scenario in her mind, every possible conversation, every gesture of courtesy she might need. But none of it prepared her for the cruel reality that awaited. Across the table, a young man, tall, confident, sharply dressed, smiled politely at first, his eyes scanning hers as if he were examining a piece of art he couldn't quite appreciate. As the meal began, Amara watched him attempt to make conversation, his voice a muffled rhythm she could not hear. But she followed along with his animated gestures and hopeful eyes. Slowly, though, the warmth faded from his expressions. His gestures became impatient, his smile strained, his hands tapping restlessly against the table. And then, without warning, he shook his head subtly, a silent dismissal that hit Amara harder than words ever could. It was over before she even realized it had begun. He excused himself, muttering something that she could not hear, and left her alone at the table, a flurry of embarrassment and humiliation rising within her. The restaurant suddenly felt cold and unforgiving, every laugh from neighboring tables a reminder of her own rejection. She sat there, staring at the empty chair opposite her, feeling a shame she couldn't translate into sound. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them, forcing herself to appear composed. Amara had grown used to the sting of exclusion. Being deaf in a hearing world often meant invisible battles, subtle rejections, and lonely moments when people assumed she couldn't follow along, couldn't understand, or didn't belong. But tonight, the sting was sharper. Tonight she had hoped for connection, for a spark of recognition, for someone to see beyond her disability. And now, all that remained was a hollow ache in her chest, and a quiet, unvoiced question: why did the world always treat her as less than? As she tried to steady her trembling hands and gather her belongings, a sudden gentle tap on her shoulder startled her. She turned and found herself facing a man she hadn't noticed before, seated at the next table. He was slightly older, in his early 30s, with kind eyes that seemed to see straight into her soul. His expression was one of empathy, not pity, and he held up a small notepad with careful handwriting. "You deserve better." Amara blinked, unsure at first if she had imagined it. The man smiled softly, then gestured to his hand, signing slowly and deliberately. She had learned sign language in school, but the real fluency had come from years of practice and necessity. She read his hands, tracing the graceful movements, and felt a surge of relief wash over her, a lifeline thrown into the storm of her humiliation. "You deserve better," he signed again, more confidently, and this time Amara's lips curved into a shy, grateful smile. The sincerity in his eyes was undeniable, a stark contrast to the rejection she had just endured. Her heart thumped, not from romantic spark, but from the rare and powerful sensation of being seen, truly seen, and valued. Before they could exchange names, the man returned to his own meal, leaving Amara with a flicker of hope. She realized that sometimes Kindness came from the most unexpected places, often when despair seemed overwhelming. She took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and let herself absorb the warmth of that small yet monumental gesture. If you believe in kindness and second chances, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. You never know whose life you might touch just by spreading love. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Amara, but in her mind she kept returning to that simple handwritten note and the man who had taken the time to communicate in a language that transcended sound. She left the restaurant not with the sting of rejection, but with a quiet determination. Life had always been challenging, but perhaps, just perhaps, it was capable of surprising her with moments of human grace. Weeks passed, and Amara's life followed its familiar rhythm of work, studies, and quiet reflection. She rarely spoke of the blind date, the memory too tender and raw to recount casually. Yet the memory of the kind man lingered in her mind like a soft glow in the dark, a beacon she wasn't yet ready to follow. Meanwhile, across town, that man whose name was David had noticed her too. He was a single father, raising a young daughter while balancing the pressures of his demanding job. Life had hardened him in ways he didn't always admit, yet he found himself drawn to small acts of compassion. That night at the restaurant had been one such act, a spontaneous decision to sign a few words, a small attempt to make someone feel valued, but he couldn't shake the image of her smile, hesitant but luminous, lingering in his mind. Their paths finally crossed again by chance at a local park where David's daughter played near. A fountain. Amara had come to feed the ducks, a quiet ritual she found soothing, and she noticed a familiar figure sitting on a bench nearby. Recognition sparked instantly. It was him. David looked up from a book, his eyes widening in surprise, and then he smiled, a smile that spoke volumes of warmth and acknowledgement. For a moment, they simply regarded each other, the noise of the park fading into insignificance. Then David signed slowly, carefully, as if testing the waters of this tentative reunion. "I didn't know I'd see you again." Amara's eyes sparkled, her heart skipping a beat. She signed back with a shy but deliberate grace. "Neither did I." The awkwardness melted quickly into conversation, silent but profound. Words were unnecessary. Their hands spoke volumes. They shared stories of their lives, of struggles and triumphs, of moments of loneliness and small victories. David told her about his daughter, about the sleepless nights and endless responsibilities, and Amara shared glimpses of her world, the challenges of being deaf in a world built for hearing. Through it all, they found understanding, a rare connection forged not by words alone but by empathy, presence, and mutual respect. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Amara and David began to meet regularly, at parks, coffee shops, and quiet corners of the city where conversation flowed freely in the fluid, expressive dance of sign language. David's daughter quickly warmed to Amara, drawn to her gentle presence and the patience that came naturally to someone who had learned to navigate silence. Together, the three of them created a rhythm, a family in the making, a patchwork of love stitched carefully with kindness and trust. Yet life, as always, tested them. Some days were shadowed by the skepticism of outsiders, whispers about a woman who was deaf dating a single father, judgments that stung despite their irrelevance. But in those moments, David's gaze reminded Amara of that first night, the note, the signing, the simple acknowledgement of worth. And Amara's resilience reminded David that love required courage, patience, and the willingness to see beyond superficial expectations. One rainy afternoon, as the city streets glistened with reflections of neon lights, Amara found herself walking beside David, their hands intertwined. His daughter skipped ahead, oblivious to the drizzle, her laughter ringing out like a bell of hope. Amara paused, feeling the weight of the moment, the journey from rejection to recognition, from loneliness to connection, from despair to tentative happiness. She realized that life's harshness had not broken her, it had shaped her, and the kindness of one stranger had sparked a chain of events that changed everything. David turned to her, his eyes glistening with the rain's reflection, and signed gently, "You are more than you realize, more than anyone ever saw." Amara's heart swelled. In that instant, she understood that the world could indeed surprise, that love could arrive quietly, tenderly, and unexpectedly. She squeezed his hand, conveying all the gratitude, relief, and joy she had felt but never spoken aloud. Time passed, and the small family grew closer, each day a testament to resilience, compassion, and the extraordinary impact of simple acts of kindness. Amara had discovered that rejection, while painful, was never the end. It was often a doorway, if one had the courage to walk through it. And David had learned that love didn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it came in silent signs, quiet understanding, and a willingness to truly see someone. Life was far from perfect. There were challenges, disagreements, and moments of doubt. But through it all, Amara and David had found a profound truth, that being seen, truly seen, was one of the greatest gifts anyone could give. And in a world that often overlooked the quiet, the marginalized, and the misunderstood, they had found each other, and a sense of belonging that was rare and precious. Before we continue, if this story has touched your heart even a little, please comment below. Your words mean so much and can inspire others too. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, Amara watched her daughter play with David's, their laughter mingling in the warm air. She felt a deep, unshakable peace, a certainty that kindness mattered, that second chances existed, and that love, when grounded in empathy and respect, could transform even the most unexpected lives. And so, the story of the poor deaf girl, once rejected at a blind date, became a story of hope, resilience, and the extraordinary impact of one simple act, a note, a sign, a recognition of worth. It reminded everyone that sometimes the world isn't cruel, it's simply waiting for the right person to show that kindness, understanding, and love are never out of reach. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to leave a comment sharing your own experience with kindness or a second chance. It could inspire someone today.